The story begins with emotions hidden within seemingly ordinary moments. While everything appears clear, feelings that go unnoticed gradually acquire a deeper meaning. From this point on, the narrative reveals not only what happened, but also the traces it left behind. My lawyer leaned forward and whispered 5 words, just 5. And Marcus's face, that arrogant, self-satisfied face I'd exchanged with him at breakfast for 18 years, turned deathly pale. His hands began to tremble. The papers he'd been so eager to sign shook like leaves in a storm. And I, for the first time in 4 years, smiled. Story, which everyone thinks is about me losing my mind, is actually the longest, most patient, and best designed game of my life. My name is Catherine Wells. I am 35 years old, and until 4 months ago, Marcus, I was married to Barrett. An 18-year marriage. That's longer than most celebrity relationships. Longer than the life cycle of some small companies. And certainly much longer than my patience would allow. But I'm a stubborn woman. I inherited that trait from my grandmother. She could wait quietly, plan, and always win in the end. I met Marcus when I was 17. I finished high school early, not because I was a genius, but because I was practical and determined, and because I really wanted to get out of my parents' house. I got a job as a file clerk at Sterling and Associates accounting firm, minimum wage, maximum paper cutting. But that's me. By the time I was 18, I had risen to the position of accounting assistant. I was good at paying attention to detail, I was good with numbers, and I was good at keeping my mouth shut and my eyes open. When I met Marcus at a real estate show, he was 29, a charming, ambitious young man full of dreams of starting his own architectural consultancy. He talked about the future, how success was just waiting for him to show up and take it. He said he would build incredible things. I told him I would help him with all the office work. Romance, right? We got married at 20. Noah was born when I was 21. While raising my son, I continued working part-time at an accounting firm, saving up for my retirement fund and scrimping every penny. My grandmother always said a woman should have her own money. Not secret money, she clarified. Just her own money. Something no one could take from her. Marcus finally achieved success in his career at the age of 30. He asked me to quit my job at the accounting firm and help him full-time. He needed someone he could completely trust to manage finances, deal with clients, coordinate with contractors. So I became everything to him, without pay. Financial manager, office manager, customer service manager, marketing coordinator, event planner. While doing all this, I raised Noah, managed the household chores, and somehow ensured everyone had enough to eat and was reasonably happy. Humans struggle to make sense of everything. This difficulty further complicates thoughts. Clarity gives way to uncertainty. My official title was wife. My unofficial title was everything else. For 12 years, I dedicated myself to making Marcus's dream a reality. And for 12 years, he received all the praise, awards, and recognition. I was Marcus's wife at every industry event. At every celebration, he thanked his team, his mentors, and his vision. But for some reason, he never found the time to thank me. At some point, things changed. He started making decisions without consulting me. He increasingly stayed up late for work. He started criticizing small things. My style of dress, the food I cooked, my lack of ambition, my alleged dishonesty. While raising my son and keeping his life in order, I was running all his back office errands for free. But of course, I wasn't ambitious enough. Then, 4 months ago, he dropped the bomb. He came home Tuesday evening. I was preparing dinner. Actually, it's his favorite thing, because apparently I'm extremely fond of unappreciated efforts. With a look on his face, he seated me at the living room table. I'm not sorry. I'm not apologizing. I'm just taking my job seriously. I want a divorce, she said. Then she added, I want the house, the consulting firm, the cars, everything. You can keep Noah. She said it as if she were ordering from a menu. I'll have all the necessary assets. Hold the child. Thank you. I hold Noah. Like my 16-year-old son. Like a leftover slice of pizza. Like an inconvenience that's allowed to stay with me. I just looked at him. That's how my 18-year marriage ended. She left him in our living room between the sofas, as if I were just some ordinary object she could throw away. What I didn't know at the time, but would learn later, was that Marcus had been planning this for months. He already had a lawyer named David Chen, expensive and experienced. While I was preparing meals and arranging doctor's appointments, he was devising the escape strategy. I was caught off guard by a man to whom I had entrusted everything. The next day, his mother arrived. Patricia, who had treated me like a maid for 18 years. Barrett arrived with perfectly styled hair and a flawlessly composed, compassionate expression on his face. He stroked my hand and told me I should try harder to please him. What happens isn't limited to the present moment. The mind tries to carry the past and present simultaneously. This burden weighs heavily on the individual internally. Emotions become more prominent as they are suppressed. The narrative deepens as these suppressed feelings surface. Men have needs too, darling, she said, as if explaining something complicated to a child who couldn't understand it. Patricia's advice on marriage was always fascinating, since her husband spent 7 days a week on the golf course, specifically to avoid being in the same room with her. But yes, the problem was me. The first week was like a dream. Marcus took me to the guest room. He had the paperwork done, offered settlement proposals, created timelines. Everything was happening so fast, and I felt suffocated. Everyone saw a woman whose world had been turned upside down, a husband abandoning her after 18 years of service, a victim who arrived unexpectedly. But here's the thing, what Marcus didn't know, what nobody knew, was that 4 years ago I found something hidden in his own financial records, something he thought would remain hidden forever. And ever since, I've been quietly, patiently preparing. Thank you for watching. Before we continue, if you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. I read and reply to all messages. Let's get back to the disaster. Within a week of the announcement, Marcus had completely taken control. In what used to be our house, the guest room became my permanent residence. My dressing room, once a spacious closet, was reduced to 2 small compartments. He graciously allowed me to store my belongings. The message was clear and unambiguous. This is no longer your home. Within 2 weeks, he began to persuade her. 29-year-old Amber Collins worked for his company. Of course she worked. She had a perfect look, worthy of being shared on social media. Strands of blonde hair, flawless nails, yoga pants more expensive than my weekly grocery shopping. He walked into my kitchen as if he owned it. He was younger than my marriage, younger than my favorite handbag, but he made amazing smoothies. I guess that's something. Marcus paraded her around like a trophy. They'd sit on my couch, watch my television, eat from my plates. He'd put his arm around my shoulder right in front of me, as if I were a piece of furniture, as if I'd already vanished. The humiliation grew stronger each day. First, she canceled my personal credit card. We need to separate the finances, she said, as if that made sense. Then the joint card. Then she suggested it would be better if I stayed somewhere else until things sorted out. My own home. And I was being asked to leave. Patricia came to help me pack my things. By help, I mean she went through my belongings one by one and decided which ones I should keep. Old clothes, no problem. Some of the family photos, my grandmother's recipe box. She hesitated about that, as if she was considering keeping it for herself. What I wasn't allowed to take. All the jewelry Marcus had given me over 18 years. Any furniture I'd chosen. Everything of value. Patricia explained that these were marital assets, and Marcus had a right to them. She put my belongings in garbage bags. Not boxes. Garbage bags. I felt like I was trash being thrown away. Throughout this whole process, there was only one person I thought I could trust. Jessica Warner. We'd been friends since college. A friendship that lasted 20 years. Filled with boyfriends, breakups, babies, and everything in between. Marcus's explanation, he was the first person I called. He was so supportive. He always asked how I was doing, wondered how I was, and was always there to listen. He'd bring me wine and let me cry on his shoulder. He told me I deserved better. He said Marcus had made a big mistake, but things were going wrong. Little things. At first, Marcus seemed to know my plans before I even made them. When I told Jessica I was thinking of fighting to get the house, Noah came home the next day and said, my dad told him it wouldn't work. Jessica, I was looking for an apartment in a particular neighborhood. Marcus pointed out that that area was too expensive for me. Then suddenly I understood. Looking back, I should have seen this years ago. How Jessica's face always lit up when Marcus entered the room. Sometimes he would compliment her excessively. Other times he would laugh a little too much at her jokes. Whenever we talked, he would always ask about her first. How is Marcus? How are things going? Is Marcus happy? She had harbored resentment towards my husband for 18 years. Marcus, much like some people collect stamps, knew exactly how to use the admirers he had. He made her feel special, important, different from other women. He probably hinted that they would get back together after the divorce. He gave her enough hope to maintain her loyalty. My best friend was his spy. 20 years of friendship were sold for a little flirting and empty promises. At least get paid more, Jessica. But the worst part wasn't Marcus. It wasn't Patricia. It wasn't even Jessica. The worst part was Noah. My son saw it all. His girlfriend, his grandmother packing my bags, his father looking at me as if I were nothing. Marcus was working on it too, putting poison in his ear for days. His mother is making things difficult. I just want everyone to be happy. She's the one dragging this out. I'm trying to be fair, but she's not cooperating. Noah started distancing himself from me. I'm not exactly angry, just distant and confused. He didn't know who to believe. His father was very persuasive. I could lose the house. I could lose the money. I could lose everything. I spent 18 years doing consulting work, but watching my son look at me as if I were the problem, that was the knife. That was the bleeding wound. I hired a lawyer, Emma, on the recommendation of someone at my old firm. 50 years old, sharp as a tack, absolutely intolerant of nonsense. She assessed my situation and laid out a plan of action. You helped establish this consulting firm, she said. You're entitled to half of everything. The house, the company, the accounts. We'll fight. I stared at her for a long time. What if I didn't want to fight? She looked at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking another language, as if I'd suggested sending Marcus a thank you card and a fruit basket. He thought I was devastated, depressed, and too exhausted to defend myself. He had no idea. I moved into a tiny apartment with Noah, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a kitchen as small as my old pantry. Not even half of our boxes fit. They were piled up in the corner of Noah's room, like a monument to how low we'd fallen. Meanwhile, Marcus shared photos of himself with Amber. A new chapter, new energy. Thank goodness, he wrote. Patricia commented, I'm so happy for you, darling. You deserve happiness. My sister retorted angrily, you deserve it. You need a real shark lawyer. Take everything from him. Everyone had advice. Everyone thought they knew what I should do. Everyone saw a woman who had given up, who couldn't fight back, who let her husband dominate her. Everyone was wrong. There's a thing about being looked down upon. People stop watching you. They stop being wary of you. They stop keeping secrets. And that's when you learn everything you need to know. 4 years. That's how long I've kept this secret. Marcus, I'd known the truth about Barrett and his glamorous, flashy, utterly fake consulting empire for so long. It all started on an ordinary Wednesday night, 4 years before the divorce. Marcus was working late again. He always worked late back then, but I didn't yet know what that really meant. I was going through the company's books, balancing the accounts, doing the unglamorous work that kept his business running. And I found something strange. A transfer to an unfamiliar account, then another, then a pattern. Money was flowing from our accounts to places I'd never seen before. I dug deeper. I followed the trail, staying up until 3 in the morning. What I found chilled me to the bone. Marcus was taking out loans against everything we owned. Our beautiful house, the one everyone admired, had 3 mortgages on it. The original loan was $450,000, a second mortgage of $300,000, taken out 4 years ago, a third mortgage of $320,000, taken out 2 years ago. The total debt was $1,200,000. The house was worth $900,000. We were $230,000 down on a house we thought was entirely ours. Things were even worse. Credit limits were used up to $250,000. Unpaid taxes amounted to $90,000. The supplier owed $130,000, $80,000 on equipment loans. The company Marcus boasted about at every party, the company supposedly in great shape, was almost $600,000 in debt. Even the cars weren't real. All 3 had lease agreements, and the final installments were due soon. We had nothing. Our monthly payments were very high. At 3 in the morning, I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by printouts doing the calculations. Total debt was about $2 million. Total actual asset value was perhaps $1,700,000. We were $300,000, maybe more, in deficit. So where had all the money gone? I kept digging. In the following weeks, I followed every transaction I could find. The picture that emerged was devastating. Cryptocurrency investments, $200,000, all lost. I lost $80,000 to gambling. An apartment in a residence I didn't know about. It was rented for a woman I didn't know. $70,000 in rent and furniture. Lifestyle expenses that never reached the house. Watches, suits, trips I wasn't invited on. Another $90,000. My husband wasn't building an empire. He was building a house of borrowed playing cards that was now on fire. We looked rich, like a mannequin in person, convincing from afar, but utterly empty up close. My first instinct was to confront him, to yell, to cry, and to demand answers. But I knew Marcus. I'd watched him perform surgeries for years. If I confronted him, he would manipulate me. He would try to explain everything in some way, making me feel like I was going crazy for questioning him. He would probably find a way to shift the blame onto me. Worse, if he knew I knew, he might try to get his hands on my separate money too. As you can see, I always kept my own little things. My grandmother's voice in my head. A woman should have her own money. This is my private pension account from my years working at an accounting firm. I put the file aside when I left the job, but I never touched it. By then, it had accumulated to almost $200,000. It was mine. Money I earned from my job is, by law, separate property. And then there was my grandmother. She passed away when I was 30 and left me $450,000. Her will was clear. This money is only for Catherine. I kept it in a separate account for 6 years, never mixing it with Marcus's finances, and never using it for household expenses. My grandmother kept her own account for 50 years. It's not secret money, she always said. It's just my money. The smartest woman I knew. I had about $600,000, and that money was entirely legally and separately mine. So I didn't confront Marcus. Instead, I protected myself. With my uncle, a retired accountant, I drafted an irrevocable will for Noah. My individual retirement account and inheritance were transferred to that foundation. My name wasn't on the list as an heir. Marcus's name definitely wasn't on the list. This was for Noah's future. College, first home, emergencies, and everything would be untouchable for him. Then I documented everything. Every mortgage document, every hidden account, every suspicious transaction. I printed copies and hid them at my sister's house. I put copies in a safe. I saved everything on an encrypted drive. Then I waited. I knew Marcus would eventually leave. Men like him always do this. They get bored, find someone younger, or decide they deserve more. I needed to be ready when it happened. For years of waiting. For years I watched him dig his hole deeper and deeper. For years we smiled at dinner, even though we knew our whole lives were built on a swamp. I became so skilled at being patient and pretending. I didn't know my husband was financially ruining both of us. I almost burst out laughing when Marcus finally filed for divorce and wanted the house, the car, the company, everything. He wasn't asking for assets. He was asking for loans. He just didn't realize it yet. Returning to the present, MI sat down opposite and placed 3 files on his desk. 4 years' worth of evidence, every mortgage document, every loan statement, every hidden account. He read them silently for about an hour. When she finally looked up, her expression had completely changed. "You've known this for years," she said. "You were expecting him to leave. You knew he would eventually do it. And when he wanted everything, he wanted all the debt. He just doesn't understand that yet." Emma leaned back in her chair. The pity in her eyes had vanished. The worry had gone. In its place was something akin to admiration. "So when you transfer the assets, I'm leaving unscathed," she said. "He'll take on the mortgages, the business debts, the rent liabilities, all of that will become his sole responsibility. And your estate, your pension account, Your separate property never to be mixed, legally protected and securely held in a trust for your son. Emma was silent for a long time. Then she smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. Mrs. Wells, she said, I think I should apologize. I thought you had given up. I smiled in return. Everyone thinks so, and that's the whole point. Nah. First of all, a lost soul, a kitten. She suddenly started looking like a chess master. I prefer grandmaster, a better outfit. The trap was already set. The numbers were verified. The paperwork was flawless. Now all I had to do was make Marcus think he had won. And no one can lose more gracefully than a woman who's been doing this for 18 years. As the process unfolds, the impact of events begins to manifest, not only in the external world but also in the individual's inner world. Each new development combines with previous thoughts, creating a mental intensity. This intensity slows down the decision-making process and pushes the person to think more deeply. While daily life continues, this inner turmoil silently grows. The person cannot fully define what they are feeling, but they realize they are carrying a weight. This weight is reflected in their behavior over time. Silences lengthen, reactions change, and perspectives shift. The meaning of what has happened begins to be questioned. This questioning process is not easy. The mind oscillates between the past and the present. Each remembered detail gives rise to a new thought. These thoughts increase the depth of the narrative. As it progresses, each scene leaves a greater impact than the previous one. Although the emotional burden intensifies, awareness also increases. The story progresses along with this inner transformation. The next 3 months were like a masterclass in acting. I became exactly the person everyone expected me to be: broken, defeated, barely standing. I went to meditation sessions with red eyes and trembling hands. I spoke in a low, hesitant voice, like a woman who had completely lost her self-confidence. I asked for so little that even the mediator was uncomfortable. During our second mediation session, I said, I just need enough money to start over. I'm not trying to make things difficult. I know that consulting work is her life's work. Home means everything to her. I don't want to break our already shattered family even more. I asked for a settlement of $25,000 in cash, my personal belongings and joint custody of Noah. That was all. Marcus agreed immediately. He probably expected me to fight for half of everything. That's what any reasonable lawyer would ask for. Instead, I wanted crumbs. He looked at me with an almost pitying gaze at that mediation table, as if he were gently slaughtering a suffering animal. I deserved an Oscar, or at least a Golden Globe, for that performance. I landed the role of a lifetime, and my only audience was my lying, cheating, soon-to-be bankrupt ex-husband. We began secret meetings at my lawyer's office. Emma focused on meticulously preparing every document, without ever communicating with the other party. The divorce agreement was written in very clear language. I was relinquishing all assets. The house, the business, the vehicles, everything would go to Marcus. But in the small print, there was a trap: the liability statement. An 8-page document, each page filled with a debt in Marcus's name, photocopies of mortgage documents with their original signatures, credit card statements accumulated over the years, gambling indictments transformed into legal documents, rental agreements for a secret apartment, detailed forensic reports, and so on. Everything was perfect. Everything was original, and everything would become Marcus's sole responsibility. Emma had prepared these documents in such a way that they seemed legally unassailable. No lawyer would dare look at them. They were a bombshell. First, Emma said in her office, these documents are clear and unambiguous. Second, they come from all your financial records. Third, when he signs them, everything will be legal. Fourth, when the court approves it, nothing can be undone. Marcus's arrogance grew day by day. He stopped being careful, stopped pretending to be the reasonable person. He started telling everyone who would listen that I hadn't even fought back. She just gave up, he told his friends. There's no resistance. She doesn't even want to sign the agreement. Patricia was even worse. In the church group, at the market, to her neighbors, she told them at every opportunity. My son was very fair. Catherine didn't ask for anything. After all, that woman was never great with money. Marcus bought himself a new watch, a Patek Philippe, $15,000. I know this because I saw the payment in the company account and I met with him where he wanted me to see it. He was still using company money for personal expenses. He was still digging the hole deeper. He even brought it up at our next mediation session, making sure he noticed. He also took Amber to dinner at that fancy restaurant where we celebrated our wedding anniversary. He posted photos on social media. He wrote, "Life is good when you're with the right person." The right person. He meant the person who wasn't yet aware of his debt. Meanwhile, Amber had started redecorating my house. Minimalist white furniture in the living room, modern art on the walls. She even painted the kitchen a light gray. Light gray. I had spent 3 months designing that kitchen. I tried various color samples, did light tests. I drove myself crazy trying to find the perfect shade. I imagined how soft terracotta would gleam in the morning sun. And she, as if nothing had happened, painted over it with a plain gray. I felt like I wanted to be furious, but I held back. Everything, including that, went according to plan. Diane kept calling, gathering information under the guise of friendship. "How are you coping?" she'd ask, her voice filled with feigned concern. I just want it all to be over, I'd say, my voice trembling slightly. "I can't fight anymore. I have no energy." Within hours, Marcus would understand. I could almost see him relaxing, letting his guard down even further. Jessica was actually his spy, and I was acting accordingly. But while the adults played their game, Noah was watching. My son, my intelligent, observant, wonderful son, was beginning to notice the inconsistencies. He noticed his father's new $15,000 watch, but he overheard Marcus complaining they didn't have enough money for the school trip. He noticed Amber's shopping bags piling up in the hallway, but he overheard Marcus complaining about financial difficulties. He realized the disconnect between the lifestyle his father projected and the constant excuses he made. One evening, Noah came to my small apartment and sat at my secondhand kitchen table. He looked at me with those serious eyes, so similar to his father's, but filled with something Marcus had long since lost. "Loyalty, Mom," he said quietly. "Is Dad really rich?" I looked at my son for a long time. My heart pounded inside me. "Do you think so?" He was quiet, thinking about what had happened. "I think something is wrong. I think he's faking it." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Trust me. Wait a little longer." My 16-year-old son knew something was wrong before 2 lawyers and an accountant did. Behind the scenes, Emma was meticulously crafting our legal strategy with surgical precision. The divorce settlement, 19 pages long. The main agreement explicitly stated that I was waiving all claims to marital property. The house, the business, the vehicles, everything would go to Marcus. In return, I would receive my modest cash settlement and leave. But in addition to this agreement, there was also a detailed liability statement. It was called Appendix B, a very innocent name, a very harmful document. Every debt, every mortgage, every loan, every liability attached to these assets. When Marcus signed for all the assets, he would legally assume all the liabilities. The mortgages would be his sole responsibility. The business debts would be entirely transferred to him. The lease obligations for the cars would also be his only problem. Everything was there, clear and unambiguous. Legal, proper, devastating. Emma told me, documents are like poetry. Boring, expensive, and poems that can ruin someone's life. My favorite kind. After a person's initial reaction to what has happened, the real process of confrontation begins. During this process, thoughts become more complex. Every detail is re-evaluated. Points previously overlooked gain importance. The mind constantly works to make sense of what has happened. This leads to emotional exhaustion. However, this exhaustion also creates inner clarity. A person considers what they can carry and what they must leave behind. These thoughts determine the direction of the narrative. Each scene is approached with a more conscious perspective. The connection with the past begins to change. Events are no longer seen simply as occurrences. They become part of a process. A week before the final hearing, Marcus's lawyer, David Chen, called Emma to express his concerns. David said cautiously, "My client is inheriting a significant amount of assets. I want to request a thorough financial audit before reaching a conclusion." To verify everything, Emma, in a neutral tone, he said, "Of course, we'll provide all the documents you need." But when David brought this to Marcus, the man who would soon be my ex-husband, he immediately blocked it. "There's no audit. Marcus told him. I founded that company. I know exactly what its value is. I'm not going to pay an accountant to tell me what I already know, David objected. I strongly recommend that we verify the asset values before signing. It's critical, Marcus interrupted him. Amber said she doesn't want this done. I don't want to do it either. No more delay. Let's get this over with. David had been a lawyer for almost 20 years. He knew a client was about to make a mistake, but he also knew he couldn't force anyone to listen to his advice. David's face was aged. The best thing he could do as a lawyer was to lower the shield. He presented Marcus with a waiver, a document acknowledging that David had offered an independent financial review, which Marcus had rejected, going against the advice of his lawyer. Marcus signed without reading, just like he signed everything else without reading. Never underestimate the power of an impatient girlfriend to push a man to overlook the finer details. Amber was worth millions of dollars to me in terms of legal strategy. The night before the hearing, Marcus sent me a message. Thank you for not making this ugly. I looked at it. It was a message I'd been waiting for a long time. 18 years of marriage. 18 years of building his business, raising his son, managing his life. And as he was pushing me aside, he was thanking me for not making things difficult for him. I just want the best for Noah, I wrote back. What was the best for Noah? A trust fund, a secure future, and a father about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. Emma called that evening. Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. The final hearing. The judge, Patricia Holden. Are you ready? I looked around my little apartment. Second-hand furniture, boxes still unopened in the corner. The tiny kitchen I'd painted terracotta because it reminded me of hope. I've been ready for years. I waited for years. And finally, it was here. On an April morning, I felt like a child with a divorce court and financial revenge. On Thursday morning at 9 o'clock, Marcus would walk into the courtroom to collect his prize. He'd signed off on a financial avalanche, a disaster. Thursday, April 20th, 9:30 in the morning. Courtroom 3D. I remember every detail of that morning. The sunlight streaming through the windows, the smell of old wood and floor polish, the quiet murmurs of the lawyers shuffling papers. This was where 18 years of marriage would officially end, and where 4 years of patience would finally pay off. Marcus was the first to arrive. Of course, he was wearing the charcoal-colored suit I wore in the accountant's office. His new watch caught the light. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man about to close a deal. A very advantageous deal. Amber was waiting in the hallway. She wasn't allowed into the courtroom, but she wanted to be there for moral support. I caught a glimpse of her from the doorway. Flawless makeup, a designer bag. She was scrolling through her phone as if this were just an ordinary appointment. Patricia was there too, sitting in the audience rows. She was dressed for the occasion, probably planning to take Marcus out to a celebratory dinner later. David Chen was anxiously reviewing his files. When I entered, he looked at me and gave me a small smile, the kind you give to someone you've beaten before. The judge, Patricia Holden, was already there, sitting at her desk. She was in her 60s, with silver hair, reading glasses, and had been a family court judge for 30 years. Marcus. I wore a simple navy dress, no jewelry, and my hair was pulled back in a low bun. I looked like a tired, defeated woman with nothing left to fight for. Perfect. I looked like someone who had given up on life and fashion at the same time. Very convincing. I really should give acting lessons, said Hakeem. Patricia Holden entered, and everyone rose to their feet. She briefly reviewed the case file, then looked up. Wells v. Barrett, final divorce hearing. I understand the parties have reached an agreement. David was the first to stand up. Yes, Your Honor. My client Marcus Barrett is taking over all marital assets, including the family home, the consulting business, and all related vehicles. Emma rose to my feet. That's right, Your Honor. My client agrees to relinquish all rights to these assets and accept the terms of the proposed settlement. Judge Holden's eyes turned to me. He scrutinized my face for a moment, searching for signs of pressure. Miss Wells, I need to be sure you understand what you are agreeing to today. You are relinquishing your rights to significant property, the family home, the business you helped establish. Are you sure this is truly what you want? I kept my voice soft, slightly shaky. Yes, Your Honor, I understand. And are you entering into this agreement voluntarily? Is no one pressuring you? No, Your Honor. I looked at my hands, then back at him. I just want my husband to have everything he wants. I want this to end. The judge studied me for a long time. I could almost see the conflict within him. Should he press harder, postpone the hearing, protect me from what seemed like a terrible verdict? But I was represented by my lawyer. I answered openly. I was a grown woman making my own choice. All right, he said finally. Let's continue. The clerk handed out the final documents. Page after page of legal texts. Documents requiring a signature every third page. Marcus eagerly signed, barely glancing at what he was approving. He wanted it all to be over. He wanted to get back to his new life and new freedom with his new girlfriend. I signed slowly, carefully. Each stroke of my pen was cautious and precise. This was the moment I had been waiting for years, because I was going to savor it. Across from the courtroom, Marcus, I saw him look at Patricia and smile. Patricia nodded in agreement. Phones vibrated in the hallway, probably Amber sending an encouraging message. He'd checked his phone in court during his own divorce hearing. That's the kind of man he was. Meanwhile, David Chen was doing what good lawyers do. He was going through the entire package of documents one last time. The main agreements were signed. The asset list was signed. The settlement terms were signed. Then came the supplementary document, the statement of liability. Appendix B. I watched his face as he read. I watched the confusion that flickered across his face as he turned a page back and forth, as if hoping he had misread something. He hadn't. David's face paled. He leaned toward Marcus, trying not to draw attention. Sir, he whispered, we need to talk. Marcus waved his hand, savoring his triumph. Not now. We're almost finished. David's voice was more anxious. You're taking on all the debt. Marcus turned to look at him. What? The statement of liability, David whispered, rustling the papers in his hand as he gestured. Mortgages, commercial loans. It's all here. You're taking personal responsibility for everything. Marcus looked at what he'd just signed for the first time. I watched his eyes scan the numbers. His face turned pale. The house, $1.2 million in debt. Market value $900,000. The business, total debt $600,000. Vehicles, rental liabilities $120,000. Additional personal liabilities, $250,000. Total debt approximately $2.6 million. The net worth of everything he just requested, minus $430,000. He hadn't won the lottery. He'd won the lottery bill. This isn't true, Marcus said, standing up. His chair scraped against the floor. He looked at me, then at the judge, then back at the documents. He hid this from me. This is fraud. The Judge Holden's voice was harsh. Mr. Barrett, sit down. These figures are fake, Marcus insisted, his voice rising. The documents have been manipulated. This Mr. Mercer. The judge's tone left no room for debate. Sit down. But his hands were trembling. His confident smile had vanished, replaced by an expression that resembled panic. Judge Holden looked at the documents before him, then at Marcus. Mr. Barrett, I'm looking at the liability statement attached to this agreement. These are liabilities relating to the assets you are claiming. Assets in your name, your business, your property. He glared at him. Are you telling this court that you didn't know your own financial situation? Silence. For how many years have your assets been in this name? Marcus couldn't find an answer. Mr. Barrett, 9 years, he finally said. Longer. But I asked, didn't you know how you held these assets? How you financed them? Marcus was speechless. His lawyer, David, tried to explain about justice, about what was written in his waiver. But the Judge Holden's patience had run out. Mr. Chen, I should mention that you advised your client to undergo an independent financial review prior to this hearing. He refused. I have the documents. David produced the waiver Marcus had signed without reading, which stated in clear and legal language that David had offered a full audit and Marcus had accepted it. It was rejected. Judge Holden briefly examined it. Therefore, Mr. Barrett was advised to verify these figures. He chose not to. He signed a waiver acknowledging this choice. Is that correct? Marcus looked at the waiver as if it were a snake that had bitten him. No. Is this your signature, Mr. Barrett? A long silence. Yes. Then you voluntarily assumed this risk. You had the opportunity to investigate. You chose not to. The agreement remains valid. Marcus turned to me. Despair shattered his composure. You knew. His voice trembled. "You knew all of this." I looked calmly into his eyes. "You had an accountant and financial advisor for 18 years, Marcus. I read every line. I checked every number. I found every secret. And you just glanced at it for 20 minutes. The emotions on his face changed so quickly I couldn't count them. Confusion, anger, betrayal, fear, and finally, the emotion I expected, awareness, the realization that he had done this to himself. "I want to withdraw the agreement," Marcus said, turning back to me. "Judge, I don't understand what I signed. This isn't fair." Judge Holden shook his head. "Mr. Barrett, you have signed documents before this court stating that you understand and agree to all the terms. You were represented by competent counsel. You declined further review. Your wife concealed nothing." She paused. "These are your debts, your mortgages, your liabilities." The judge's gavel came down. "Mrs. Wells, your agreement is yours. Mr. Barrett, you have received the agreed assets, along with all associated liabilities. This marriage is over." I stood up, straightened my dress, and picked up my bag. Then I looked at Marcus one last time. He was slumped in his chair, papers scattered before him, his whole world collapsing around him. "You said you wanted everything except Aaron," I said quietly. "I gave you exactly what you wanted." I walked out of the courtroom without looking back. In the hallway, I could hear Marcus's voice rising, shouting at David, demanding to know how this happened, and threatening to sue. David's calm responses: "I told you to get an audit. I have it in writing. You refused." Through the glass doors, I saw Amber's expression change as she listened. I saw her look at Marcus. Everything was written on her face. What would she do without a lawyer? Which bank would give her a loan? Was no one home? She was gone before I even reached the elevator. She walked quickly, the sound of her heels on the marble floor echoing, not looking back. Amber's departure was faster than her entry into my marriage. At least it was consistent. I stepped outside in the April sun. The sky was blue. The air was warm. Somewhere behind me, my ex-husband was yelling at his lawyer about justice and fraud, that none of it was his fault. Ahead of me was a brand new life. Smaller, simpler, but entirely mine. Every experience leads a person to realize something new about themselves. This process of awareness is not easy. The mind questions its usual thought patterns. This questioning takes time. People cannot immediately accept what happens. However, as resistance decreases, understanding increases. This understanding changes the pace of the narrative. The tension takes on a different dimension. The emotional impact of the events is felt more clearly. Each scene leaves a lasting impression on the viewer. The narrative no longer merely conveys events. It also reflects an inner journey. This journey is silent but intense. The collapse happened faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, Amber moved out, packed her belongings in the middle of the night, and left a note saying, "I didn't sign a contract for this." The kitchen stood empty. Its color hadn't changed, but it belonged to someone else. Marcus tried to sell the house within a month, but if you have more debt than something is worth, there are no buyers. Only banks call about unpaid installments, and real estate agents suggest low-interest sales. Within 2 months, he started defaulting on business payments. Suppliers sued. His credit line was frozen. The company Marcus had built over 18 years, the company I had supported for 12 years, was falling apart. Within 3 months, Marcus started meeting with bankruptcy lawyers. The man who once boasted of his consulting skills was now calculating which assets he could protect from creditors. The answer was almost nothing. Lorraine's perfect son was calling relatives, asking for loans, going to their homes with various excuses and explanations. Nobody knew. Nobody was notified beforehand. Catherine must have hidden this somehow. I've been fooled. But the documents told a different story. The mortgages were in his name. The loans were in his name. The secret apartment, the casino debts, the cash losses, all the choices, all the signatures were his. I heard Lorraine's Christmas card that year was very short. Marcus is exploring new opportunities. Every cloud has a silver lining. A silver lining. Yes. About 3 months after the divorce, Marcus came to my apartment. I barely recognized him. He had lost an unhealthy amount of weight. There were dark circles under his eyes. His suit was wrinkled. He didn't have a watch. He looked like a man who had just come out of a war and lost. He stood in my doorway, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him, almost. "I didn't know you were this bad," he said. That's how it sounded. "I made mistakes. I know that now, but I didn't want any of this to happen." I leaned against the door frame and looked at him, really looked. Him. This man I'd loved for almost half my life. This man who cast me aside. This man now drowning in the consequences of his own choices. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Maybe we can find a solution. I know I made mistakes." But he couldn't even finish his sentence. He didn't dare ask what he really wanted. Help. My help. "After all, you wanted everything except Tyler," I said calmly. "You got exactly what you wanted." I closed the door. He stood in the hallway for 10 minutes. I know because I watched him through the peephole while he ate ice cream. It was the best show I've ever seen. 5 stars. I'd watch it again. That evening, after Noah had gone to bed, I sat in my little living room and looked at my grandmother's photograph on the shelf. The recipe box was beside it. Almost the only thing Patricia ever bought. The thing I valued most. My dear grandmother, you were always right. With her own money, with her own choices, with her own future. The apartment was quiet, small. Nothing like the house I'd lived in for 18 years. But it was my apartment. Every paint color, every piece of furniture, every decision was mine. Noah hugged me one evening, a month after the court hearing. He really hugged me. 16-year-old boys don't usually hug their mothers voluntarily. "I understand." He simply said, "I'm proud of you." I didn't need anything more than that. Inside me, a reddening spot that I'd kept hidden for years healed. My $25,000 severance package went towards settling in. The first month's rent, the deposit, basic furniture that wouldn't fall apart. It wasn't luxury, but it was stability. The trust fund stayed exactly where it was. Noah's future, college, maybe one day his first home. A safety net no one could take from him. And I enrolled in interior design classes at the local university. My dream I'd put off until I was 23 to help Marcus build his empire. Finally, I was building my own empire. I started small. My first real client was a woman named Sandra, 52, who had just ended her 28-year marriage. She stood lost in her empty new apartment and asked me, "How do you start over?" I thought for a moment. One room at a time. One color at a time. One day at a time. We painted her kitchen terracotta. She cried when she saw it. Tears of joy, she said. The color of new beginnings. News of my apartment decorating spread. Other women called. Divorced women, widows, women redesigning their lives. Each one needed a different color. Each one carried a different story. My business began. I wasn't just selling colors, I was selling hope. Marcus's bankruptcy proceedings were closed 6 months later. The courts delivered their verdict. All assets were sold. The house was sold for a pittance. The company was dissolved. The vehicles were recovered. There were rumors about the amount of Marcus's remaining debt. $1 million. Maybe more. No one was sure. He wouldn't say. Lorraine's church group talks were stopped. There was no longer a bragging right to tell. No more photos to share on social media. Patricia tried a different tactic. She contacted him through Noah. "Tell your mother I didn't know about your financial problems. Tell her I apologize for my behavior toward her. Tell her I want to talk to her." Noah looked at me. What does she need to answer to? I said, if she was truly sorry, she would have gone to court with her own lawyer to petition for a change of situation. But she didn't, so she must want something else. Noah nodded. He had the wisdom of a smart child. Patricia wanted forgiveness. I wanted peace. Guess who got what they wanted? "You wanted everything except Tyler," I said, my words echoing quietly through the building's hustle and bustle. That sentence, 5 words, but it carried 18 years of marriage, a broken heart, and a life rebuilt. Marcus had signed without question. Emma said the documents were perfect. Could any court overturn this decision? I asked one day. Theoretically, it's possible, she said, but Marcus would have to prove it. The documents would have to be forged, but they aren't, or I would have to harm you. But you didn't, or I would have to harm your lawyer. But David supports me. There's no way. There was no way around it. I had drawn the map for years later. I had waited for years. I had watched his arrogance for years. I had watched him deepen his pit for years. And then, with a stroke of a pen, I brought the peak down to the flesh. Technically, it wasn't fair. But justice sometimes comes in layers like a sandwich. I had made my preferred presentation. A year after the divorce, I heard from Marcus about someone on the phone talking about modern civilization. He had moved to Denizli. He was trying to start a small consulting office. He didn't have a single client. Patricia was living with him. Lorraine turned her back. At this point, as the story nears its end, what remains is not just what was said, but also the feelings it evoked. Every event, every emotion, and every silence takes on a different meaning over time. Initially, people feel what they have experienced as a heavy burden, but as time passes, this burden opens up space for reflection and understanding. Everything that happened doesn't remain in the past. It silently transforms within the person. Things that seem clear at the beginning of the story begin to look different at the end. Emotions that seem complex at first gradually settle down. This process is not easy. People sometimes think about their experiences over and over again. Some moments get stuck in the mind. Some emotions linger, but these repetitions gradually create an internal order. As time passes, perspectives change. Events are no longer judged solely by how they happened, but by their impact. People realize that even the most challenging moments leave a mark. These marks are indelible, but they don't remain heavy either. As life goes on, people learn to move forward, carrying everything they have with them. This story doesn't offer an ending. It's more like a pause, to stop and catch your breath, to look back, and then to move forward again. Because every narrative finds its true meaning at the point where it connects with the listener's own life. The story can evoke different emotions in the viewer's mind. Some will find a piece of themselves in it. Some will simply listen and think. Others will be silently moved. These differences constitute the power of the story. People don't always find clear answers. Some questions remain unanswered. However, every question gives the courage to continue thinking. This courage allows one to be more honest with oneself. What has happened is no longer just an event from the past. It transforms into experiences that shape the present. Over time, emotions calm down. Things that were intensely felt at first become more balanced. People become more understanding of themselves. They learn to accept their mistakes, shortcomings, and experiences as they are. This acceptance brings inner peace. The point reached at the end of the story isn't where everything is resolved, but it's a clear turning point. Here, one can listen to oneself. One can see more clearly what one has experienced, what one feels, and what one needs. This awareness is the simplest form of progress. Life doesn't always progress through grand changes. Often, it shifts direction with small realizations. A thought becoming clearer, a feeling settling in, is enough. These small steps form the foundation of a long journey. Silence is important in this part of the narrative, because some stories don't end with a loud resounding sound. They continue, echoing within, merging with the viewer's own experiences, and generating new thoughts. This story quietly comes to an end here, but its impact continues, because every narrative heard is rewritten in the listener's mind. This rewriting is unique to each individual. Ultimately, what remains is this: everything that happens leads a person to a certain point. This point is sometimes clear, sometimes uncertain, but it always involves progress. And perhaps most importantly, no story remains confined to the place where it is told. Everyone who listens derives their own meaning from it. This meaning silently accompanies them on their journey. This narrative ends here, but the thoughts continue, because every ending is a quiet door opening to a new perspective. I know people who hear this story support you, I said to Noah one day, but this isn't really my story. This is the story of every woman who stayed silent for 18 years, worked, built trust, and then walked away. Because a woman should have her own money, just your money, her own choices, security that should never be in anyone's hands. Noah nodded. The apartment was small, old furniture, unopened boxes, a terracotta kitchen, but it was mine, and I was free. Not the freedom I'd been waiting for years. My own freedom. The freedom of the righteous and the unsuccessful. What I'd been waiting for 4 years wasn't just revenge. It was the freedom to take back my own life. The freedom to make choices. The freedom to walk in, close the door, keep my anger in check, and write my name on my own desk. I worked until dawn. I reviewed the documents. I talked to the lawyer and planned everything. For 4 years, I said nothing. I smiled, I played along. He waited, and then with the signature, it was all over. Calm inside and out. Nobody understood what I knew. Nobody understood what I was doing. Even Marcus in the end could only say, "You knew." Yes, I knew. I always knew. My grandmother taught me a woman should own her own money, not hidden money, her own money, and never, ever let anyone take it from her. Because money is power, and power is freedom. And freedom is the only thing no amount of money can buy. Thank you so much for watching. The story isn't over, but the beginning has begun. The place where every woman needs to start. With herself. With her own money. With her own future. Click the like button, subscribe, and please, if you see yourself in this story, be brave. Because one day, your story might begin too.